What does it mean to get the backstory? It means asking the hard questions and getting to the heart of what matters about your mental, spiritual, financial, and physical well being. In my quest to find wholeness, wellness, and end the 40 years of obesity that ravaged my body, I found that it was my own stories that were keeping me trapped in processed food addiction. Once I started asking the right questions, those same stories led to brand new consciousness, mindfulness, and agency. Each month on Get the Backstory Live, we take on the tough questions so you can find the healing, hope, and transformation hidden in your story.
Hello, and welcome to tonight's show, the final episode of Get the Backstory Live of 2024. I am so excited that you have joined us tonight. And tonight we have a very special show. It's December, it's the holidays, and we are going to be looking at the holidays a little differently tonight. We're going to be talking about grief during the holidays. It's a happy time of the year. It's a joyful time of the year, and it's expressive time of the year, but not for everybody. And so we have two special guests on the show tonight that are going to help us pull back the covers, get to the backstory, and give us some strategies, right? Some strategies and some tips, and help us discuss how to navigate the holiday season when things just might not be going so well for us. So, my first guest, let me do a quick little introduction, is Reverend Dr. Irance Reddix is our first guest, and she has been quite busy in her life. She graduated in 1982 from MIT with a bachelor's degree in science and chemical engineering and was a member of the National Society of Black Engineers from 1979 to 1982. Next, in 1985, she graduated from Howard University College of Medicine in Washington, D.C., and has been licensed in the state of Maryland to practice medicine since 2006. After that, she accepted her other calling and received her Master's of Theology in 2012 from St. Mary's Ecumenical Institute and the Master's of Divinity in 2015 from the Wesley Theological Seminary. Currently, Reverend Dr. Reddix is the pastor of St. John's United Methodist Church in Baltimore, Maryland, and she is the CEO and creator of the Agilum Community Healthcare Center and takes patients with or without insurance. Reverend Dr. Reddix walks the walk, and she certainly talks the talk. Please let's welcome her to Get the Backstory Live.
Hello, how are
Doc,
you?
Dr. Rance, it's good to see you. It's good to see you. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm so excited that you're joining us tonight, and I'm super excited that we're going to have an opportunity to continue the conversation that we started, and we started to pull the covers back on before the show started. So I read an introduction for you for the audience, but I would just like for you to take a few moments and introduce yourself. Introduce yourself to our audience tonight.
Well, I'll try to have a paucity of words, uh, but I am like most people, do not have a linear journey. My background is in engineering, but it would have been in biomedical engineering. And my interest was in helping people uh, with disabilities initially. Uh, but that led me to medicine. And after that, I realized that I didn't really want to be in a corporate career in medicine. And so decided to go to medical school, from there to Howard and in Washington, D.C. And from Howard, Howard shaped me. And it really helped me and understand the need for urban medicine. And so I went into family medicine, and went from there to Baylor, where I became a family practitioner. And from Baylor to Houston, again, it's not linear, and Houston to several other cities, including Florida and back to Louisiana, and back here to Maryland. And when I got to Maryland, I did have an interest in that intersection between faith and health, but didn't understand what that meant. And so I wanted to, I'm always a student of being accurate. So I wanted to understand what is it that people who's had a spiritual background tended to do better. So that's what had me an interest in theology. So I went to St. Mary's and then to Wesley. Um, and when I got to Wesley, a professor there said, if you really want to talk about faith and health, you really have to speak that language. And so that's drove me to become get my master's of divinity, and actually go to a church. I went at St. John's. I'm now actually at Wesley. I'm not at Wesley I'm now in New Waverly, which is in Baltimore City, where I'm the full-time pastor there. Uh, but meanwhile, I realized that primary care is important, and that most of my people had chronic issues like diabetes, hypertension, obesity. But then there was stress, and there was depression, there was hunger, there was jog loss, there was all of those things that mushed together. And so we started the Adulam Community Healthcare Center, a nonprofit healthcare center that's located at New Waverly in the center of the city, to be able to address all those needs, not just hunger and depression, but spiritual dryness uh, and anxiety and job loss and all of those things. And my lifetime journey is to help people understand that they are what they believe. So if
Yes.
you believe that you're going to get better, most people do. If you believe that you're not going to get better, and I'm sick and I'm tired, you tend to be sick and tired, and you don't do better. So our journey is to help people understand that you are what you believe, and you can change what you believe by studying, by support, by being in a community of people that can support you. So yeah, it was a non-linear journey, and I'm still on it. Uh, but this is what we're doing, and that's what we do.
Well, you when you were talking about changing what you believe, you were speaking my language. I am so happy that you said that. And and tonight, we are talking about the subject of grief around the holidays, and we do have another guest that's coming on. I'm not ready to bring him on just yet, but there was something that you said about what do we do that just it seems like it is the right time for me to read this passage and share this passage, and it is from this book that Dr. Nancy O.L. Class wrote after her husband died, and it's called The Love Story: The Transformative Power of the 12 Steps. And in this book, she unpacks her grieving unpacks her grieving process and what she did to manage the grief. And that there's this one part where she writes and she talks about the steps, and I just want to read it. It and this was just in 11 November 2022. A black morning. This is the darkest time of the year. How have I managed my grief? One, gratitude. Two, work my list and be open for spontaneity. Three, plan something to look forward to that involves being with people that I love. And four, pour love into everything. Love is stronger than grief.
Mhm.
Love is stronger than grief.
Yes.
And there was something about what you were saying that made me feel like it was the perfect time to read that passage and bring that up because in our earlier conversation you talked about having experienced a recent loss yourself,
Yes.
and we kind of are in this space where our minds link things with things, and as we navigate this season, what can you talk about? What can you share about people's belief around grief and how we handle it and how we manage it?
Yes. Well, yes, I have had a recent loss. And I understand what the young lady said is the darkest time when it's supposed to be the most joyful time. But we this season for us is called a season of Advent. And there are four pillars that we go through this movement of Advent. It is hope, peace, joy, and love. And it's for 4 weeks. And if we can go through each of those, being present for each of those movements, then it helps us go through this grief. Myself, the for my loss, I was thinking about our anniversary, which would have been the 23rd.
Oh
And so
wow.
as I'm looking at the 23rd, I'm thinking, oh boy, I really don't want to celebrate this uh, this day when I've lost. But then I realized that to not celebrate it does not do honor to the memory.
Yes.
So those four things, that hope, that peace, and that joy, and that love, if we could go through those moments, just as the young lady said, it's really the same words, just in a different way, then it helps us navigate them every day. That hope is the hope that today is not the end, that we've gone beyond where we are today, and there is a tomorrow. And that word peace is actually shalom, which is a wholeness. It's not just like peace out, but it really is a wholeness and a whole well-being. The word actually means well-being as well. And then the joy is not a happy, happy, joy, joy, happiness. It is actually a state of being. It
Mhm.
allows you to be settled even in your grief,
Yes.
and to
Yes.
honor the person or the things that you're grieving on. Go through the process and settle in it. Cry if you have to, laugh if you have to, feel the feelings that you have if you have to, but recognize, like hope, that it is not the end, it is just part of your journey. And all
Oh.
of that culminates into the last day, the last part of the journey, which is love. And that love is not just a feeling of love, it is an agape love. It is a total love that loves despite and beyond. And if you can go through those each day, not as a whole, but each day, then it helps you go through this season and realize, you know what, that tree is pretty. That bird, is it actually sings to me. Or that silver bell song that is so silly to us, that sometimes can make us laugh because it does capture a memory of something that you have lost during that time. Or maybe you may be one of those people that didn't have it, and you're grieving the fact that, why is everybody happy and I'm not? But it's because you still have today, which gives you another chance to get it right.
Oh, I love that you talk about honoring grief, because in the past, like a couple years ago, when I first started doing this show, it was called something else, and we did a show called Stress, Grief, and Food. And I have talked to so many people and worked with so many people that lament about gaining weight when someone dies, and going to the food. I mean, that's one part of the addiction. And and as I have looked at it and seen it over the years, what there's a piece of me that feels like that when when we go to the food and use food as an escape from the discomfort, to mask the feeling, like to get some numbness or even to get some pleasure because we're in so much pain, going to the food dishonors the grieving process, because you're not allowing yourself to grief is a way to honor the love, is to honor the person's memory, to honor the relationship.
Exactly.
And that, yeah, and that we're kind of in this place, I see, that we feel like we're not supposed to feel pain, that we don't know how to feel it, or we think that if we feel it, it's going to kill us, right? That we won't survive it. And I just, I'm constantly trying to wrap my head around it. Even Dr. Rance, when I, just think about it, I think I'm probably a little bit older than you are, but I'm from the South. And I remember, being a kid when somebody would die. Kids are kind of insensitive. We're not the most sensitive creatures on the planet. When somebody would die, we would get all excited because we knew if we went to the person's house that there was going to
Every
be
food.
lots of food. There was going to be cakes and pound cake, and nobody would be really paying attention, so we could go and get a plate, right? And so, but when I think about it, and I the situation where somebody is sick or somebody dies, and this is like this natural, oh well, we need to take some food, we need to take them something. And I think, do we really? Is this like this response that says, what, I can't take this person's pain away. I certainly can't bring somebody back from the dead, but I can fry some chicken and make a casserole,
Yeah.
and it'll make me feel like I'm doing something. It'll make me
Yeah.
feel like
Yeah.
I'm in control. It'll make me feel better. Might
Right.
not necessarily make them feel better, but I'm
Right.
going to take it to them. And that somehow it gets translated that us just showing up like empty handed, we are enough. We don't have to always have something in our hand. Just our energy, just our presence, just to hold somebody's hand there and, look at them or let them look at you. That
Yeah.
we don't have to have that. But
Yes.
we
So
think,
what we forget is that pain is a signal. Pain is a signal that we're alive. And so when we feel pain, it allows us to know that we are alive. And the pain that we feel for grief allows us to know how much we love or care or miss that thing or that person that we have. So pain is something that we should not necessarily avoid, but grow through.
go through.
And I think that our thing with the food is people are looking for a tangible way of showing up, when, just as you say, it is the ministry of presence that is important. We appreciate the casseroles because sometimes when you're grieving, you don't eat
Hmm.
or you eat too much. And so the casserole is something you can put a fork in and then say, "Oh, thank you, Sister Joni. I appreciate it." However, you're showing up to me and holding my hand today and let me cry till my stomach hurt so that I may laugh until my stomach hurt is a
Hmm.
much more valuable. The food is valuable as well, but the ministry of presence is the part that you don't forget. You forget the casserole, but the hug and the holding you cannot forget.
I love the hug and the holding, and I also love, in order to in order to laugh until your stomach hurts, you got to be able to cry until your stomach hurts.
Exactly. You got
Um,
to do both
uh,
parts of it.
you gotta need both parts. And I think with that cry till your stomach hurts, this might be a good time to bring on our next guest. We
Amen.
bring our next guest. So our next guest, I'm really delighted to introduce Christopher Niles. Christopher, thank you so much for being patient while we while Dr. Rancy and I
Oh,
got
of
into this
course.
got into this grief mode. But you have a part. You have a part. It's time for you to jump in. But let me read your introduction.
Sure.
All right. Christopher Niles is a senior hotline counselor with Call 988. The Call 988 hotline offers high quality emergency emotional support to residents in Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Howard County, and Carroll County in Maryland. But this hotline number is a hotline that's available across the country, isn't it?
Yes,
Or no?
absolutely.
That's what I thought.
Nationwide.
Nationwide. Anyone who calls the 988 helpline from this region will immediately be connected to a mental health counselor for safe, supportive, and confidential mental health services. 988 is free and operates 24/7, 365 days of the year. So, thank you, Christopher, for joining us.
It's my
And I
pleasure.
just would you tell us a little bit more about this service and what the service offers? Because I just felt like, that crying till your stomach hurts, somebody may be in that place where they're just in the crying till your stomach hurts part, and they can't see their way to, I'll get past this and there will be a time when I laugh until my stomach hurts. So can you
Sure.
kind of step in and talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, first, I just want to thank the good Reverend for representing Louisiana. I actually grew up here in Baltimore, but I spent 13 years in Southwest Louisiana, and that's where I went through my graduate school and everything. So it was really interesting to hear that, and then you made your way back here, and here I am too. So it's fascinating. It's funny how that happens, right?
Me
Um,
too. Me too. Me too. I want to be all because I've got that FOMO going on. That fear of missing out. That fear of missing out. Dr. Red said, because I when you start talking about Baylor and Houston, I grew up in Texas. I grew up in Texas, so I wanted to say something then, and I grew up, Chris, like 35 miles from the Louisiana border,
no.
right across the line from Shreveport,
Oh,
right across the
wow.
Oh my
line
gosh.
Wow.
from Shreveport.
And look at that. Here we all are, right? All
Here
of
we
us
are.
together.
Here we are. Right.
Yeah. But yeah, so anyway, I mean, it was just I had to say that. I had to, representing where we're all moving back from. Um, but yeah, 988 is it's a really fascinating um nationwide program that provides a lot of resources. People know it as the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline or just simply 988. But we do so much more than that. Um, because grief prevents it or presents itself in a lot of different ways, as both of you expressed, through food or through um, the grieving process or how people provide support in different ways, right? And so our hotline service is kind of the same way, where some call centers that you might reach when you call are going to be staffed by volunteers or people that have gone through some severe losses or traumas or significant crises in their lives, right? But we also can handle suicidal issues. We can also handle just supportive counseling when somebody needs someone to talk to during grief or any other kind of hardship that they're facing, even substance abuse. I thought it was really fascinating when you guys mentioned how it's the hug that meant more than the food. I remember, I apologize, we're a little bit dry in here, but um, I lost my 5-year-old daughter several years ago in a tragic school bus accident, which is what pulled me out of law school and put me into psychology. And um, I wanted to be able to help people that went through what I went through. And that really reminded me of when we were in the hospital waiting for the doctors to tell us if she's going to live or die. There were so many emotions that were hitting us. We were grieving at the time. We were hoping at the time. It was just this hodgepodge of chaos in all of us. There were countless people from the area that brought us food, pizzas. They cooked things. And yes, being in the deep south, we had plenty of fried chicken and it was
Right,
fantastic. But it didn't really matter. All the greens in the world can't take away all those feelings that you're having. And as the non-mother parent, I was often pushed to the side because everybody was all about mom, and naturally so. And I didn't anticipate or expect anything different, and I directed everything to her as well. But there was one moment that stands out so much to me to this day. My daughter would have been 18 years old this year. Um, and I remember this so vividly, despite all the food boxes and all the things that were happening. One little girl, who was the daughter of some caterers that brought food to the hospital for us, they were all walking out of the room and nobody really talked to me. It was all about mom and grandma and grandpa, and I just was kind of off to the side. But this little girl walked out the door and stopped in the doorway, turned around and ran up to me, gave me a hug, and she handed me, do you guys know the pipe cleaner things
Yes,
that little
yes,
kids make crafts?
yes.
She had made a ring about this big around of pipe cleaners. They're all different colors. And y'all, when I tell you this thing was a mess, it was like a pre-K kid, really. There were things poking out of it. But she gave that to me, and I'll tell you what, that meant so much to me. I held on to that thing, and I still have the little pipe cleaner ring to this day. Because one person showed that they cared about me. And so when we have these holidays come and all these memories come up, my daughter was passed away on December 6th. So this is a hard time for me. Christmas was her and my holiday. Halloween was the wife and all the other kids' holiday. But for her and me, it was Christmas. And she would stay up, and let me tell you, it was real hard for Santa Claus to come and put those presents under the tree because this baby girl had to decorate the house as brilliantly as possible because Santa Claus had to have the best house in the neighborhood. And so eventually I'd be like, oh, baby, I'm so tired. I gotta go to bed. And so that was how I tricked her. But this time of year is tremendously hard for myself and so many other people. The service that we provide is that when you feel like everybody's catering to mom, everybody's doing this, everybody's trying to figure out, all the doctors are in and out, and you're feeling like, I'm happy I can turn all this attention to her because she deserves this, she's the mom, but I still hurt too. And so, especially around the holiday season, people have all these feelings. They have all these grief and depression and anxiety things that come in because of this time. So we give them that one little girl that came in the room and gave me that ring. We give them that one person that can show them they care without giving them 5,000 pounds of donuts. And so that's why, we are just falling apart, and I apologize. But that's why I think 988 is such a valuable asset to so many people. And people just don't realize that we do so much more than just suicide support. We provide that one person that they can go to when they need somebody, with no judgment, no ridicule, no negative thoughts or feedback. They have that one person that they can reach out to and have no difficulties whatsoever getting that help. And that's nationwide, anytime, day or night.
So, Chris, what do you say to the person that feels like, or to the person or to the people that feel like they need to be strong all the time? And before you answer the question, I just want to say this. Anybody that's watching, if you have a question, if you have a question for Christopher Niles, if you have a question for Dr. Irance, if you have a question for me, please just pop it in the chat. Pop it in the chat, and any of us will be happy to answer any question that you might have. So now after I did that, so I want to come back to you, Christopher. Maybe you too, Dr. Rand, say what do you say to the person that feels like you just need to be strong all the time?
I think the doctor said something really brilliant that kind of resonated with me. Just on that subject, I actually have a friend who's battling a terminal disease where his kidneys are failing, and he's been on lists for transplants for years. And honestly, right before this, he called me. That's why I was a little behind. I'm sorry for that. But he was really struggling because he couldn't get his at-home dialysis machine to work, and he was kind of going into a deep depression because he was frustrated. And he told me that, he said, I was always the strong one. I'm always the one that keeps things going. And I had to tell him, it's something that you kind of touched on. You are showing so much strength in your weakness, allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling and reaching out for that help is so much more strength than you're giving yourself credit for. I can't express that enough. Just having the strength to reach out and admit it is so paramount to somebody's survival in some cases.
Oh wow, the thing that you don't necessarily think of as being strong is really the thing that's strong.
Absolutely.
I love that. I love that. Strong enough to admit that you need some support. Strong enough
Absolutely.
to admit that you need some support. I see you nodding your head, Dr. Rante.
Yes, because we talk about it in terms of spirituality, is there is strength in our weakness. When we are weak, that is when we are actually the strongest, because that's when we can receive help. When we say help, if I may address to what Chris is saying, I had an occasion to call um, in your hotline because of a crisis that was happening with my family member before he passed away. And the thing that they did that was helpful, because everybody was looking at him, but I was the one who was in crisis, as you said. Um, and the thing they asked me, the first person they asked me was, question they asked me was, am I okay? Well, obviously I wasn't okay because I was calling. But the second thing that the person said to me was, just take a deep breath, and we're here for you as you're walking through. And so that's kind of right, like that pipe cleaner ring, that sometimes when you're in the midst of things, you just want someone to hear you or see you, and that you're not okay, and that it's okay to not be okay.
Absolutely.
And I think that is the one thing during this season, which can be a season of happiness, but a season of grief, to be able to say, maybe to only one person, because you can't tell everyone your weakness,
Right.
that I am not okay, that I am okay. Don't give me a plate of something. Don't ask me to go out Don't ask me to go to a party. Don't ask me to do any of those things. I'm not okay. But give me a moment of that being not okay to maybe cry until your stomach hurt or be alone, or you may need that ministry of presence with the person who just put the hand on the shoulder and say, just breathe. I got you. And that's the thing that in this post-COVID world, we have forgotten that the human touch is valuable, and human presence, that we are communal being and we are created for community. No person is supposed to be an island unto themselves. We're
Oh, that
supposed to be. Go ahead.
that what you said about the human touch, it resonates with me so much, because I know how healing the human touch can be. And here, I see a question that has come up in the chat from. I want to, before I do my question, I want to do this while it's up. So this is from Kevin Pierce, and it says, "How are we supposed to feel human during the holidays when we are all becoming representations of ourselves through social media engagements and online holiday shopping?" How are we supposed to feel human during the holidays when we are all becoming representations of ourselves through social media engagement and online holiday shopping? And I think what you were saying, Dr. Irance, by human touch and human connection and communing is the answer to that.
Yes.
Is being in connection with one another, right? Being communing with one another, being moving all this other stuff out of the way and being authentic, and being emotion to emotion with the people that are around us.
And what was the thing that you read from the book? The young lady, the things that she did, that
Yeah,
also
okay.
answers.
I'll go back to them.
Yes.
Oh, here it is. Gratitude, work with my list and be open for spontaneity. Plan something to look forward to that involves being with people I love.
Yes.
That's it. And the last, pour love into everything. Love is stronger than grief. Love is stronger than grief. And there was something else, what I was about to mention about the touch. And maybe you have heard of it. I either read about this study or I heard it, and it was an experiment that happened decades ago, years
Yes.
ago, and it was done with babies. And one set of babies, they just provided the physical needs. They just fed them and clothed them and put them in the crib. And then the other set of babies, they fed them and clothed them, but they loved on them. They, picked them up and hugged them, and you know did the things that you do with babies. And they had to stop the study because the babies that weren't touched and picked up and loved on were failing to thrive. They had to stop the study, and it had everything to do with the touching and the cuddling and all of that. Do you know what? Have you heard of this study? You know what study I'm
Yes,
talking
yes,
about?
and
Okay.
I've heard it more than once. And the thing
Okay.
is that we are created in community. We are created to be in community. Otherwise, we could have been cloned, but we're not. We are in community in our mother's womb. Then, when we're born, we are this animal that needs the milk of a human, and the milk of the touch and the swaddling, just to get us into something that that we can be self-sufficient. And we can't be self-sufficient at 1, 2, 3, 4. For some of my children, 18, 19, 20, we still need that human interaction just to teach us to eat and to do all the things that we do. So human interaction, unfortunately, COVID has made it so that people don't want to touch each other, but we need that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, we need that. You know, I right when we were kind of coming out of COVID, I don't know if it was a Christmas party, a holiday party year before last, and we all wore these buttons, and the buttons were different colors based on your level of I guess comfort in touching other people. So it was, the red, green, and yellow, right? Red, you stay over there. We can just wave. Good to see you, right. I'm the good neighbor across the street. Versus green. We're all messed up. We can hug and be all okay. But I do want to, like just dive a little deeper into the point that Kevin brought up about how do we do this in the advent of social media, because thanks for putting that back up, is that there are all sorts of studies, and Mel, our producer and owner of Source, brought this up. We had a conversation earlier this week, is that the advent and the growth of social media is kind of creating silos for people and making people feel even more alone than ever during times when we should be feeling the closest. And that is kind of a problem. Do you hear that at all, Chris, when people are calling on the 988 line that any of people's anxiety is around that?
Yeah, I think it goes a little further than just that too. You see it a lot with children and adolescents, even more so than adults. Adults deal with things a lot differently. They have depressions, or older adults have a lot of difficulty because the world is changing and it is becoming very digital and virtual, and so they're not really that capable on phones or computers or with technology. But with kids especially, I feel like everybody that is watching this podcast probably is familiar with being able to access some things on the internet. But if that's the case, they've also probably heard the term keyboard warrior. And what happens is people get this bloated sense of empowerment sometimes when you can't see my face. We're not in the same room. We're not even in the same country in some cases. And so I feel empowered to be mean to you, to bully you, to berate you, to be racist or sexist or anti whatever religion or all of that. Anti-LGBTQ is just off the chain, and people feel empowered to do that. And I think, in answer to your question, those types of negative empowerments are a result of lack of personal interaction. Because even just in this, I think it's awesome that I'm meeting you guys today. And I think it's awesome that we kind of have similar travels around the country, right? In fact, we probably could all sit down and have a really great gumbo and talk about how somebody else's was better and you prefer jambalaya. But at the end of the day, everybody is a person. Everybody is a human being. And like the doctor was saying, that interaction is so necessary, because that in itself is empowering. It's empowering to self-esteem. It's a mood stabilizer, just like going out in the sun is. Having that ability to talk to you. I could talk to you on the phone right now, and I can hear you laugh, but when I can see you guys laugh, I know that there's a deeper connection, right? But when we're talking through text messages and chat boxes, we don't have that. I don't even hear you laughing now. You say LOL. I swear to God. I looked at one of my kids the other day. I sent them a TikTok because they love sending me these stupid TikToks, and I sent one. I thought it was hilarious. And I watched them watch the TikTok, and this was their face. And then the next thing you know, I get a text back in response to the thing I sent them, and I see their face, and I put LOL. Like, no, you're not laughing, kid. I can see you. But it's this detachment, I think, is kind of what is causing that. And yes, it's led to bullying, which leads to increased anxieties, increased depression, increased suicidality. And it's tragic, but the world is evolving. And I think it's important for us to find ways to kind of bring that piece of humanity back into it, because we've lost it somewhere, you know?
I love that, bringing the piece of humanity back into it. And, I'm looking at Kevin's question again. How are we supposed to feel human during the holidays when we're all becoming representations of ourselves through social media engagement and online holiday shopping? And, the social media engagement and online holiday shopping, those aren't the only things, right, that are keeping us from connecting with one another. And I have got to tell you all the story, and I've got to tell you the story because the thing that kept me from feeling connected and being connected to people, not just during the holidays but for so much of my life, was food addiction. And I had an epiphany a couple of years ago when I went to Dallas. I went to Dallas and I was meeting one of my very best friends at my favorite restaurant in Dallas, which is a Mexican restaurant, because Mexican food is my favorite food, and you get the best Mexican. I think you get the best Tex-Mex for sure in Texas, in Dallas, at this place. And so we were going to meet there, and she called and said she couldn't make it. Well, okay, you can't make it. I'm going to go without you. And I go. And because I'm by myself, I go to the bar and I get something to drink, and I'm looking at the menu. And as I'm looking at the menu, I don't want anything on the menu. And so I'm sitting there and I'm kind of perplexed. How could I possibly be in my favorite restaurant about to eat my favorite food and not want anything on the menu? I really couldn't wrap my head around it, right? So I'm sitting there sipping my drink, look at the menu. I had told them to take the chips away. Not because I would be tempted if they were there. I just didn't want them. And I couldn't even really figure that out. There was a young man sitting next to me, and he saw my keys. And he made a comment about my keys. And for the purposes of this conversation, I want to say that he was a young white guy, right? Maybe 20, 24, 25, 26 years old. And so he says something about my keys, and I say something back. And I think he asked me where I'm from, and I tell him that I'm from Annapolis. And he goes, "Oh, I almost went to the Naval Academy." And we start to have a little bit of a conversation. Then he asked me, what did I do? I told him I was a writer. He asked me what I wrote about, and I told him that I wrote about the connections that we make around, and the associations that we make around food and memory and an event and emotions and feelings and why we eat what we eat. I went in a little bit more explanation than that, but that's the nexus of what I said. And so he looked at me and he said, "Well, I think you might have something there." Now, my response, being 62 years old, looking at this little 20-year-old, is like, well, young man, why do you think I have something here, right? Right? In all your brilliance. And so he looks at me and he said, "Now I understand why I get sad every time I eat steak, peas, and mashed potatoes. That was the meal that I was eating when my parents told me they were going to get a divorce." That statement opened up an hour and a half conversation that I had with this young man, Brandon Rancusi and David Graham. Still remember their names. We sat there at that bar. We talked for an hour and a half. We talked about race. We talked about religion. We talked about economics. We talked about education. I mean, just heart to heart, mind to mind conversations. He kept looking at me and saying, "You're the same age as my mother?" Oh, like I took out my driver's license so he could see. Yes, I am. But we talked for an hour and a half on these really heavy, meaningful conversations. And this is 2 years later. I'm still talking about that conversation.
Mm.
And I'm telling the story because it would have never happened the year or the year before with him sitting there right there next to me, because I would have been too busy in my plate of enchiladas or my burrito or my chips to be open to the connection that was sitting right beside me. But when I was in a space where I could move the food out of the way and that the food was just a backdrop, and I think about all as we move into these holiday gatherings and meetings, I mean, in family events, how we miss the connections with our elders, with our young people, with that, because we're worried about who made the potato salad, right? Right. We're worried about we're worried about who made the potato salad, rather than Kevin. We don't even use words anymore. That's true. Um,
So true.
but that but it's happening. We get disconnected, whether in my case it was food or these other distractions that keep us from making the human connections that are so important to our experience of being human. And it just seems like that we have to make a conscious effort to move distractions out of the way,
Right.
whatever they are.
Yeah.
Whatever the barrier is, whatever the block is that's keeping us from being eyeball to eyeball, belly to belly, arm to arm, hug to hug, or whatever the case may be. So that story just bubbled up, and I felt the need to share it.
I believe that silos belong with missiles.
Mm,
So silos are meant to be individualized. And unfortunately, that's the world we live in, is in silos. And so afraid of contagion. But there are some things we need to be infected and affected with, which is people, and the contagiousness of laughter and or smiling. I think there are commercials now that talk about when you smile, pass it on,
yes,
because they are
yes.
understanding, advertisers are understanding that we're missing that human interaction.
And
You know,
we and we can bring it back, but we have to, what's the word that we use, and we hear so often these days, the word intentional,
intentional. Yes.
right? We have to, I feel like we have to be intentional about reclaiming that, reclaiming personal personal connections.
And I do want to say on that, um, there is an aspect when I began working on my PhD. Um, I, of course, as most graduate students and PhD students do, they join like the American Psychiatric Association or the American Medical Association or whatever the organization might be for you. Um, and so I got a lot of journals and these things that would show me like new modern research that's being done. And one thing that stuck with me, and I actually apply it a lot, and I teach it to my staff that I'm teaching now. We're onboarding a bunch of brand new counselors, and I'm responsible for training them. And I apply, it's called humor psychology, because as you said, laughter is contagious, and you're right. It's kind of like a yawn. Somebody yawns, everybody's got a yawn. You start laughing and it resonates with everybody. And it's amazing what just that simple act can do to somebody who is excruciatingly depressed. But if you can get them to even the slightest chuckle, it opens this whole floodgate, and it just reduces that stress, reduces the anxiety. It removes those pressures that they were under, you know? It's really cool how that works.
I love that. And it makes me feel like, Chris, maybe the thing to do is just to take a book of jokes, take a book of jokes to the holiday dinner, right?
But I think you have to make it relate to their problem a little bit more. But yeah, kind of in general.
Oh man. We have covered like a wide range of things in this conversation tonight as we talk about grief. But there's one thing that I want to go back to, as to how it shows up, and I just want to be able to give listeners a chance or an opportunity to kind of get a sense of, if it shows up, and how it shows up maybe in different parts of our body, or what it looks like, what it feels like, because it may not always feel like what we think. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're always walking around crying, right? So I see you nodding your head, Dr. Irance.
Yes, sometimes grief is isolation. Sometimes I don't see, because I'm a primary care physician. Uh, Sometimes grief has shown up as distractedness or headaches or lack of memory. They say, oh, I just can't remember anything, and all those things that I'm supposed to do, I just can't remember. Or I know I'm supposed to call somebody, but and so it does. It can show up in a myriad of ways, and it has to do with the person's personality. So if they're a type A personality, their grief may show up, but the fact that they can't do what you say in that book, they can't do the things on their checklist.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that they just can't do. It's just, or their laundry. Somehow their laundry is not done. Or they're that one aunt that they know that they're supposed to call, they just can't call. So it does show up in many ways, and you have to give yourself the grace enough to realize that you are grieving, and that your grieving state sometimes doesn't allow you to just be your full authentic self. So you give yourself a little bit of grace to say, I'm not okay. Maybe I'll call Aunt Alice tomorrow. Or maybe not. Maybe I won't call her at all, because that's more than I can handle, because that reminds me of, you know, Uncle Johnny, who I'm missing. So I think that it can show up depending on what person's personalities are. What are the things that is most affected by their grief? Because we've been talking about all day that grief is a process. It's not a one size fit all.
Thank you so much for that. So as we are getting down to the end of our hour, I want to come back to you, Chris, and just see if you have any strategies, tips, guides, so like a checklist that you might share with people to help navigate the holiday season. And you
Yeah,
mentioned you mentioned the you mentioned the laughter. You mentioned the laughter. I don't want
sure.
to forget that. But are there other things that come to mind that we can put in our toolkit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, I got to give us a plug at 988. You always have someone that you can call, and it doesn't have to be when you reach that stage where I'm sure the doctor knows this term, anhedonia, where you've lost interest in something. I'm a video gamer, and all of a sudden I just don't want to play games anymore. Um, the biggest factor, I think, in um, getting yourself able to move through the process of grieving is to recognize when the problem is beginning. Because any therapist or counselor is going to go over a myriad of coping skills, which, as you asked about the toolbox, having these in your toolbox is very important because it helps you get through. But more importantly, is recognizing when these symptoms begin. Because If you have a small fire in your backyard, you can put that out with a fire extinguisher. That's your coping skill. But if you wait till your whole porch is on fire and people are throwing cats out the window because the whole place is about to go down, that fire extinguisher isn't going to work and you need something bigger, right? We call 911. When it comes to your mental health, grief, depression, anxiety, knowing when something is beginning so you can start using those coping skills. Coping skills can be anything. Honestly, the most common ones are journaling, listening to music, going for a walk, soaking up some sun, going to the gym and exercising, right? But they can also be things that you just enjoy doing. And when you do that, it becomes a reward, a mental reward. So it bolsters that I'm going to keep working to get better. And then when you reach that point where you're like, okay, I don't know how to get there, I don't know what else to do, have a list of friends, family, some people you trust that you can talk to and say, I don't feel okay. Something's not right. I don't know what it is, but I've had this pain in my neck for a week. And no matter how many massages I get, it just keeps coming back. I think maybe it's stress. And when they don't have an answer for you, having another backup plan. Call 988. Call your pastor. Call your doctor and say, hey, is there maybe some medicine I can look into that might help me when this starts? I don't have to take all the time. There's a lot of different things. It's just being open to follow the things that you put into your toolbox that help you. And everybody's toolbox is going to be different.
Well, thank you so much. And call your pastor who is a doctor. How about that?
How about that
Christopher Niles, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here and for all the work that you do at the 988 Crisis Hotline Center. Reverend Dr. Irance Reddix, thank you so much for all that you have done, for all that you do for the work in the community and just, serving, right? Serving. And I want to thank anybody who's listening tonight, right? I also want to thank you for listening, and I also want to encourage you. If you see something or if you feel something going on with your friends, with your family, with your loved ones, remember this conversation. Remember 988. Remember to tell them a joke. Remember to get connected. Remember to reach out. Remember to give them a hug. Remember to say, go for a walk with me. Remember to sit down and just pat them on the knee. I mean, I grew up in the South. That's what we do. You sit down next to the old people. You sit down next to them. They pat you on your love. They give you a love pat, right? We all know what that is. It's like, you all right. You all right. I'm right here, and we are right here. We are right here on Get the Backstory Live. I'm Michelle Petties. I'm your host. Join us next month. Join us next month on January 17th. We'll be bringing in the new year. Like, it's so hard to believe. The 12 months have gone by so quickly. 2024, we'll be talking about vision boarding. Yes, vision boarding. Setting your vision for the upcoming year. Because, as Dr. Irance says, right? You are what you believe. And we can set our beliefs. Not just in January, we can set them right now, but we'll have a special show on your vision with our vision board party next month. Good night, everybody. Happy holidays to you. Thank you all so much.
What does it mean to get the backstory? It means asking the hard questions and getting to the heart of what matters about your mental, spiritual, financial, and physical well-being. In my quest to find wholeness, wellness, and end the 40 years of obesity that ravaged my body, I found that it was my own stories that were keeping me trapped in processed food addiction. Once I started asking the right questions, those same stories led to brand new consciousness, mindfulness, and agency. Each month on Get the Backstory Live, we take on the tough questions so you can find the healing, hope, and transformation hidden in your story.